Hey guys, Zach Butler, YGO, back with a deck profile. I just wanted to show you guys my Snake Eyes deck. It's pretty normal outside of the non-engine, which is actually the whole reason I'm even showing it. I know we're in a Tier 0 format that's not the most interesting as far as deck building goes, but I think there's a lot of value to be gained in looking at problem solving in a different way, as opposed to just like hurling, like the Ashes, Veilers, Imperms, Mourners, and stuff like that. I actually chose a slightly different approach in terms of the non-engine I'm playing, and we'll get into that and to like why they're good and why I think it actually has some applications going forward in just a moment. As always, if you like this sort of content, give me a like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know down below what you're doing to kind of, I don't want to say the word enjoy, but kind of problem solve this format, because I know it can be really frustrating if you're not playing one of the top decks. But I think there's a lot of room for innovation, even though we're in such a tight format. So first, we'll just dive right into the deck, and I'll explain the theory behind it in a moment. So you've got your 3 D-Bell Star, 3 Wanted, that's pretty stock standard, and then 3 Ash, 2 Poplar, 1 Oak, and 2 Flamberge, as well as the 1/1 of the spells. I think, again, this is all pretty normal. Nothing really to say much there. I did consider Birch as an option, just as like a searchable extender, because I think that with how simplified the games get, having that searchable extender that might not necessarily be Poplar, but is just another name, is really valuable. Because like one thing I've decided to do is I've decided to forego Jet Synchron entirely. I think that with how many hand traps are being like thrown back and forth, you're probably not going to get to that point. And if you do get to the point where you're able to successfully summon the Jet Synchron and successfully able to do all the synchro summons, you've probably won the game already. So there's really just no need to continue to do that, and it opens up your extra deck a decent amount, because that is 1/5 of your extra that you get to use. Unfortunately, I only own 2 bonfires. It's actually one of the things I personally have found to be enjoyable about this format, is that all of the fire stuff you see, all of this Wanted stuff, I did not pay for any of it. I actually took the Labyrinth deck that you all had seen before and took all those winnings and traded all of those winnings towards store credit at my locals to get this stuff. So I'm short 1 bonfire, but I would be playing a 3rd one if I had it. It would just be over the 1-for-1 most likely. Or it would just be 41. I don't know yet. And then the last extender is Monster Reborn. This is a card that I'm torn on, but I found to be very useful. Again, in these hand trap wars, a card like Monster Reborn gets a ton of agency, because you just need power cards that you can draw. And that's kind of the approach that I'm taking, is I just want all my cards that I draw that aren't just like the standard Snake Eyes engine cards to be really good, really powerful cards, both going first and going second. Speaking of, there are hand traps. There's actually 9 of them, which is a far cry less than the 18 that most people are playing right now. And then none of them are, I guess one of them is pretty standard in the main deck, and I'll go over that one first. It's the 3 Nibiru. I think Nibiru is incredible right now. It's solid against Voiceless Voice game 1, because a lot of their plays, they are extending into it, which can be really good. It's also very good into the Snake Eye deck when combined with the other 2 hand traps in my deck. It's solid into Branded, and it's a solid card altogether. The next 2 hand traps that I play actually are 3 Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, and 3 Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion. So the theory behind this, actually, we'll go into that here in a second, because it ties into the rest of the non-engine, which is 3 Shared Ride, 3 Forbidden Droplet, 3 Triple Tactics Talent, the 1 Called by the Grave, and the 1 Change of Heart. So instead of trying to prevent my opponent from starting their engine and, throwing Veilers and Imperms and things like that at like the Snake Eye Ash and the Poplars and things like that, instead what I wanted to do is I wanted to take the opposite approach of letting them do a lot of their plays and then impacting specific aspects of their setup with these cards. So for example, Ghost Ogre is actually incredibly valuable into the mirror match, because their average setup is going to be Appaloosa, Flamberge, and an IP Masquerena. Well, if you can deal with the Appaloosa with, your talents or your droplets or whatever, then that card doesn't matter. Then the only thing left to deal with is the IP, and Ogre dealing with the IP is actually really important, because if you think about it, we'll get back to these non-engine cards in a second here. I just want to show you an example. So your average setup has, like I said, the Appaloosa, the Flamberge on the field with your 3 names engraved, and then the IP in the spell trap zone. So then they get to the point where they have it up here, and then this is the opponent's field. So typically what they'll do is they'll link this into SP Little Knight, and then they'll get these 3 monsters back. So then you'll have to deal with the SP, the Ash Search, the Oak summoning back the Poplar, and the Poplar Search, which means that they're going to have follow-up on the next turn in terms of a spell with Poplar and a monster with Ash. They're also going to have 3 bodies, and they're going to have a Banish on the field that's going to help prevent stuff, as well as the 3 negates from the Appaloosa. But instead, if you were to Ghost Ogre on the IP Masquerena, let's say you willingly let the Appaloosa go, and you use Ogre on the Masquerena, well, then the Masquerena is gone, obviously. So then they're left with this field, which is far less imposing because the Appaloosa doesn't actually do anything. And if you can get rid of the Snake Eyes Flamberge Dragon without letting them get to these parts, which is actually pretty easy to do, then suddenly they don't have a follow-up. The big thing about the Fire deck that I found is that it plays a lot like old Dragon Link, where turn 1, you're looking to make a turn where they have to answer enough to not die, and then on your next turn you're going to do everything you can to make this the game push. So if you can prevent that, that's huge. So even if, let's say, they go to do their setup and they get to the point where they summon the IP and they have these 2 engrave, that's fine. They summon the back their monsters, and then let's say they summon back this. If you Nibiru them here, then they can keep playing, which obviously is a problem. But if you Nibiru them there and you have Ghost Ogre, for example, and then they activate Temple to summon the Flamberge to keep playing, you just Ogre the Temple, and then the Temple is destroyed, and now they just have a Nibiru token and a Flamberge in the spell trap zone that is now useless, which is really important. Another thing I really like about Ogre in particular is that Ogre has applications against Voiceless Voice, which a lot of the hand traps don't. It has applications against aspects of the mirror match that other parts don't. For example, like I said, Temple and IP. It also has applications against Appaloosa, which generally is one of the harder points to answer, is the free negations from Appaloosa. If you Ogre the Appaloosa, it can't negate anymore because it can't reduce, so that's huge. And then Ghost Bell is effectively like Ash in that it can stop quite a number of the plays, but what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to let them set up half their field and then break that apart. So that's why you see those non-engine. And then, of course, we have the rest of the non-engine that I mentioned here. In the shared rides, Forbidden Droplets, Talents, Call by the Grave, and Change of Heart. I don't think I need to explain these 2. These are just power cards. But Talents is a card that I don't know. I genuinely don't think it is acceptable to not play Talents in this format. I think the card is just too good, and you need to play it in as many copies as you can in every deck right now. There are so many hand traps being thrown around that it will be live, and the moment that it's live, it just lets you have so much free agency in the game that by the time that you pass turn over, you have so much information to work with. You can effectively just kind of play like almost like Pegasus style, where you get to just see their hand. Even if you don't use the effect to see their hand because you felt like it's not worth it, you can usually glean a lot of information based on what hand traps they're using and the order that they're doing them, on which hand traps that they have and like what the game, the state of their hand is. These 6 non-engine were the 6 I was the most unsure about. Forbidden Droplet pairs very nicely with Nibiru. Similarly to the Stovey Torby or Chandrake Lear with Nibiru play, where you can activate Nibiru and then you chain those and send it and then just tribute the field, that has come up. Forbidden Droplet also answers Appaloosa, IP, SP, Barone, and Savage all at once, which is ridiculous. Also answers the Flamberge on your turn as well, and can set up your graveyard really nicely for Oak. I'm a big fan of Forbidden Droplet. One cool thing, too, that did come up was I had a Flamberge in my hand that I needed to get rid of, so I used Droplet, sent Flamberge, and then 2 level 1s, negated 3 things, and then brought back the level 1s and continued to play. I think Forbidden Droplet is really good. It's also, again, one of the only cards that's good into Voiceless Voice, especially going second, because you can still activate it on the Skull Guardian, even though it can't be targeted, because obviously Droplet doesn't target. Shared Ride is an interesting one, and I'm not sure. There's a lot of theory behind it that I could like make whole videos on this card. I think this card is crazy. But the idea behind Shared Ride was that going first, it is maxi. If I'm going first, and I do my setup, and you go, and you are trying to answer my setup, and now suddenly for every card that you add to your hand, I'm getting to draw free cards, meaning I'm going to get to see more of my non-engine cards that you now know that I play a bunch of. It's a lot harder to play. Same as Maxi. However, going second, it's also very good, specifically against fire decks, because what'll happen is, take that average setup again. If they go Flamberge, effect, summon back Ash Oak, and go Chainlink 1 Oak, or Chainlink 1 Ash, Chainlink 2 Oak, you chain Shared Ride. At worst, Shared Ride is going to draw one card. It's going to draw one card at worst. Or it'll exchange with their Ash Blossom. Also fine. Then, though, they have to decide if they want to, if they summon the Poplar, which they're probably going to, if they want to activate the Poplar effect and search for another spell. If they do that, you get another draw off of the Shared Ride. If they don't, Shared Ride effectively drew a card and prevented them from getting to additional follow-up. From there, you have just simplified the game state while also replacing the card, which I think is really good. And it gives you the ability to see more cards while also taking away cards from the opponent. And I think that that is a really valuable thing to do when the format is so dependent on making sure you have as many cards as you can, because you're just going to be throwing stuff at the opponent until it sticks. Against Voiceless Voice, again, all of their search effects, Shared Ride will get a ton of utility there. Against Fire King, same thing. Even against Labyrinth, if they go summon Ariana and you activate Shared Ride, that's fine. Even if it's just as an Upstart Goblin. If a card is at worst a 0, but a potential plus, I'm a huge fan of that. And it being a quick play is also really great. And it's almost like a floodgate in that it kind of says you have to either kill me if you're going to be doing all these search effects, or you're falling so far behind it doesn't matter. So that was the main deck. It was exactly 40 cards, which I'm a big fan of. I wanted this deck to be as efficient as possible. I'm not necessarily sure that this is the correct way to approach it, but I wanted to try something different and play a bunch of different non-engine that most people haven't really gotten a chance to experiment with. So that's why you see the Ashes, Ogres, and Bells. Or the Ogres, Bells, Nibiru's, and things like that. I think this is actually a really solid approach, and you should definitely give it a try. For the extra deck, we have Link Karibo, Relinquished Anima. I think Anima is really good, especially if you aren't playing the Jet Synchron. You have the room for it. And when you're taking the approach of trying to pick apart specific aspects of their setup, it gets a lot more value there. IP, SP, Dark, Hida, Sunlight Wolf, Nightmare Phoenix, and then Promethean Princess. I think that's pretty obvious. Only one. I've never needed a second one. Then Heat Soul and Selene. Selene is such a crazy card in this deck. I actually initially wanted to play Magician's Souls. I just didn't have room for them. But I think if I got like 2 more souls, I'd probably play like a full set of 3. With how many spells you're playing, and just, you know, cards like Shared Ride and Forbidden Droplet like that being in your deck, and then how many spells the opponent is playing, you're getting a lot of value in that. And then for the 4 rank 4s, I play Access Code, which does surprisingly come up. It was a card I've thought about cutting, but it just randomly in grind games will come up, and you do get into a surprisingly high amount of grind games. Appaloosa, Raging Phoenix, and Zelantis. So that was the extra deck. And then the side deck, I sided 3 Phantasmes. Again, this ties into the Shared Ride kind of theory, where you're getting a ton of cards and you just want to see as much of your deck as you can. I took the approach with this deck that I did with Labyrinth, where you just want to see as much engine as you can. So you want to see as deep as you can. So cards like Phantasme and Shared Ride will do that. I do still side Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. This is mostly for branded, but it also is very good into like Voiceless Voice and things like that, obviously. I rarely side this in the mirror match because it is just not necessarily worth as much as the actual high impact cards I'm playing. And because I'm playing cards like Shared Ride and Phantasme, I'm going to see those cards so much more often. And then there's one of each of these 3 Bestials. So you got Magnamut, Druisworm, and Baldrake. Obviously very good into Voiceless Voice. Surprisingly good into the Mirror Match because of the reliance on Link Rebo. And then I played 3 Soul Release. This is a card that I think that a lot of players overvalued against Fire King and undervalued into Pure. Again, funnily enough, if you take the average setup that the Snake Eye deck makes, they'll have the 3 level 1 fires and then some useless cards in grave. If you banish those 3 level 1 fires, then suddenly the Flamberge just doesn't matter. So cards like this, Forbidden Droplet, Triple Tactics Talent, Change of Heart, all of those cards just aim to mitigate the break point of the follow-up. I'm not looking to break the board in the classic sense of like I need to take apart what they did and then, you know, make a big push and kill them there. I think the way you should be approaching board breakers in the current climate of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not trying to necessarily break apart everything they're doing. You want to break apart enough that you can establish a half board yourself, but you want to break apart the follow-up. Because what will happen is, if they can't do anything on the following turn, well then your half board is good enough. And they've simplified the game already for you by burning so many resources that cards like Soul Release, which don't necessarily seem to be that high impact, are actually incredibly impactful. If you banish Ash, Oak, and Poplar, and then even if they link into SP, if you can attack over that SP, which isn't a terribly hard ask with this deck, suddenly they're very far behind. So that's just something to consider, and I was talking about all of this in my recent article on TCG Player, which please go check that out. I do a much more efficient job of explaining it there. And then 3 Cosmic Cyclone. Again, I just want to break apart the pieces, each thing, instead of the whole giant board. I just want to pick apart each specific little scenario that's causing me trouble and then leave them with just random pieces that don't do anything. So yeah, that's the deck, guys. Let me know what you think down below. Like I said, this is just kind of an experimental way to play it. I know it looks very standard. It's mostly just the non-engine. I wanted to approach it in a different way because I know that the format can be a little overwhelming for a lot of players, and so far this has been working pretty well. If your area is mostly fire and you are playing fire, I highly suggest trying this out. It does get a little bit worse into Labyrinth, but it's better into Voiceless Voice and the Mirror Match as well, I think. So it might be worth giving a shot. Let me know if you have any questions down below, and I'll do my best to answer them. And until next time, have a great day.